Hello and welcome back to another episode of Majlis and Markets. I am your host Hassan Javraj. Majlis and Markets brings you thought-provoking conversations with influential leaders in Islamic and global markets. Wherever you're listening to us, please remember to like, share and subscribe. You can also send your feedback, comments, questions and suggestions to our email address, hassan@majlisandmarkets.com. In today's episode, we're talking about Islamic finance and impact investing. The modern Islamic finance industry has grown since the 1970s into a $5 trillion industry. Critics argue that despite its ethical roots, it often prioritizes shareholder returns over impact investing. Whilst Islamic finance shares principles with ethical finance, it usually focuses on profits rather than social and environmental outcomes. To explore this further, we spoke with Reza Jafrali, a specialist in Islamic and ethical finance at the University of Leuven. In our discussion, we unpack what impact investing is, why Islamic finance struggles with it, and how it can enhance its impact in Muslim-majority countries. Reza Jafrali, welcome to Majlis and Markets. Good to have you here.
Thank you, Hassan. Assalamu alaikum to you and to all your listeners. If I may, I'd like to start with a short prayer. This prayer is very important to me because it summarizes my life. So if you will allow me, I will start with the Serenity Prayer of Reinhold Niebuhr.
Yeah, you can go for it.
God, give me the grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed, courage to change the things which should be changed, and the wisdom to distinguish the one from the other. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking, as he did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen.
MashaAllah, that sounds really nice, Reza, this prayer that you recited. Just for our listeners, what's the prayer called again?
It's the Serenity Prayer, and it's by Reinhold Niebuhr. It's a prayer that uplifts me, especially in times of need. So I've always found solace through this prayer.
Very good.
It is for me one of the great prayers of the Western world. It brings a lot of peace to your heart. The other thing which I can also recommend, is the poem "If" by Rudyard Kipling. That's probably the finest poem ever written in the English language.
Great. I'll link it in the show notes if you send it to me after the episode.
Certainly, I'll do so.
Reza, you and I are good friends, and we've known each other for quite a long time, and we talk quite often, quite candidly about different topics. And I find your perspective on things and like your experience in life and in in this industry, in the Islamic finance industry, and more broadly the impact industry, really fascinating. But before we get into all of that and what you're up to today, maybe you could give our listeners your background story.
Yes, I mean, very in a few words. I'm born in the island of Mauritius. I'm a child of the Cold War, so to speak. I got into law, and I studied a lot of law. I'm called as a barrister in Middle Temple. I did my LLB in Canterbury. I did my bar vocational course in Bristol. I did another 3 Masters of Laws at the University of Leuven in Belgium, where I was taught by practitioners. And I've been a researcher in Islamic, ethical, and impact finance for more than 14 years now. I'm a member of the Center for Economic and Ethics at the University of Leuven in Belgium.
Fantastic. And like before you heard about Islamic finance, what was your plan? Were you planning to become like a big hotshot Harvey Specter kind of lawyer?
Well, it's special because I got into Islamic finance because I met while I was in Leuven, I met someone very remarkable. The gentleman's name is Jan Myers. He's arguably the finest mergers and acquisitions lawyer of Europe. Yeah, he was the lawyer of Lakshmi Mittal when they bought Oslo.
Oh, wow.
And he told me that with my background, I needed to go into Islamic finance. And he's a brilliant man and he's a very spiritual man. And essentially, when he gave me that advice, I said, this is someone who, for me, I aspire to be as good a lawyer as him. Yeah. And I followed his advice. And yeah, it was it was very insightful. Yeah.
Yeah. And what year was this approximately?
Hmm? I'm sorry.
What year was this approximately in?
This was a bit more like 16 years ago,
Okay,
16, 17 years ago. Yeah, that was like quite a while. I remember that in the same year as he gave me this advice, what I did is that I went to do the summer school on Islamic finance in Durham. Yeah.
Yes, 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 very well.
And while I was there, I had the great privilege of meeting Mr. Iqbal Azaya,
Mm.
and he became my mentor, and I mean, for me, almost a father figure. So,
Yeah, he's definitely like one of the pioneers of Islamic finance, I would say, since the 1970s until today.
very much so. For me, he's a very wise man, and he has lived many lives. He's accomplished great things, and uh, by meeting him in Durham, certainly it changed my life because he's the one who organized the Takaful Summit, and he gave me insights in Islamic finance that I would not have had otherwise.
Great, great. And so you had this introduction to Islamic finance, but you're also quite widely involved in impact finance or impact investing. Maybe you could try and explain what is impact investing.
Well, it's impact investing is it's ultimately doing well by doing good. Yeah. But it's far more than that. In that impact investing, true impact investing is about giving, shall I say, market level returns to the capital providers, to the investors, but while doing good in the world. Yeah. And impact investing takes, in my opinion, a number of forms. Yeah. There's a number of things which you wouldn't think about as impact investing, but which are. Uh, I became very obsessed with the idea of impact finance and entrepreneurship and tech entrepreneurship in particular when I discovered Skype. As I mean, these days we use WhatsApp, Telegram. There's a number of extraordinary apps that enable us to talk almost for free to people on the other side of the world. But in my day, while I was at university, communication from England to Mauritius was a real struggle. Yeah. But Skype came in and changed all that. Yeah. And WhatsApp is in fact an extraordinary app, but it's happened partly because of Skype. And Skype was in its day one of arguably the largest European tech exit. And what was extraordinary about Skype was that it made a lot of money, but it changed the world in a very, very positive way. People were able to not only talk to their loved ones in other hemisphere, whereas previously we were getting strangled by telecom cartels, but also it enabled the creation of a lot of lean, mean startups, which were creating a lot of value in their ecosystems. So by and large, for me, Skype was ultimately about impact investing, and it's the ultimate form of doing well by doing good. And the founders of Skype, as well as all as the VCs backing Skype, made fabulous returns. So there was value for society, there was value for the investors, there was value for the entrepreneurs. Obviously, there was disruption because true innovation is disruptive, but overall there was huge amount of value created for society at large and for the private investors.
So it's kind of like a more moral kind of economic model, right? It's not like the riba based or the more like traditional economics, right?
It's not a traditional economics. I tend to say that you don't have, it's not venture capitalism, it's adventure capitalism.
Mm.
And ultimately, you're not investing in a business model or a business plan. Certainly, you have to put money in a corporate vehicle, but ultimately, who you are backing are the entrepreneurs or a team of entrepreneurs, because as Mike Tyson would say, everybody's got a plan until they are hit, and as Jensen Huang would most likely concur, is entrepreneurship, tech entrepreneurship is it's a roller coaster ride. Yeah?
Mm.
So it's, you've got to be able to pivot, you've got to be able to iterate, you've got to be able to dodge, and you've got to be able to juggle all kinds of things at the same time. But this is where true value creation can happen. And what is extraordinary about our age, Hassan, is that we truly are in the age of entrepreneurship. I mean, this might sound like science fiction a couple of decades back, but we live in an age where people out of garages have created behemoths of industry. I mean, Google came out from a garage. So we live in an extraordinary time. And if you look at NVIDIA, this is also a very inspirational story. I mean, I used to find Elon Musk an extraordinary entrepreneur, but when I listen to Jensen Huang speak, hats off to that gentleman.
Yeah, absolutely. I think his story is really fascinating. And if you'd invested in the time when he started the company, I think you would be a very happy person. And I would also say, like, he's done, like, they've been very influential in terms of disrupting the tech market and, trying to make it better for users as well as investors, right?
Very much so. Yeah. But I mean, he's faced potential bankruptcy so many times, and he's come back stronger. I mean, it's inspirational.
Definitely. And then Reza, so you had this introduction to Islamic finance and this marriage, or I'd say this kind of like same at the same time, this introduction to impact investing. Would you say that Islamic finance and impact investing should, well, like as I said, should be married together, or are they completely different?
I think because we've got to remember what Islamic finance ultimately is. So Islamic finance is an attempt to bring the Quranic principles into the economic life. Now, obviously, Islamic finance is presented as Sharia compliant finance. But for me, I look at it as a believer. I believe in the hereafter. I believe in the end of days. I believe in the sanctity of our Lord. And for me, whatever I have materially is purely on trust. I'm here for a very limited period of time. I want my children to inherit a viable and good planet, If you look at our planet, it's astounding, the amount of biodiversity, the sheer beauty of our planet. And it's very clear in the Quranic revelation that we are given this world on trust and that we need to take care of it. Now, coming back to Islamic finance, or what should we say is in fact modern Islamic finance, is an attempt to bring Islamic principles into economic life. And modern Islamic finance is in fact, you should say, about 60 years old, yeah, because there was a period of colonialization in the Islamic world, which was about 500, 600 years old, yeah. So it's only when the Islamic world became affluent again that there's this modern Islamic finance that came. And there was this, I'd say, focus and maybe over-focus on avoiding riba. But I understand the necessity to avoid interest and everything that, all the evils that it brings. Yeah. But I think that a true Islamic finance needs to go far beyond simply riba free. Yeah. I mean, there's this whole idea of going towards tayyib. Yeah. But for me, what the Quranic revelation impresses upon us is that we have got wealth, but when we use wealth, we have an impact in this world. And depending on how we use this wealth, we can have a positive or we can have a negative impact. Yeah? So if we can orientate our wealth as custodians towards doing good in society, then I think that our Lord and Creator will be pleased with us. And for me, true Islamic finance, I mean, true, shall I say, Quranic finance, because I think that simply talking about Islamic finance or Sharia compliant finance is not enough. I mean, I want to talk about Quranic finance is about true impact finance. And I'd even go further, yeah, because there's a lot of greenwashing in the conventional economic sector. But paradoxically, if you use halal as a filter, halal is a very, very effective filter against greenwashing and forces us somewhere to look far more into the actual substance. And obviously, there's this everlasting debate about substance and form. I would have to say that, listen, as I said, one day I'm going to die and I'm going to be judged upstairs. And I want to be able to say in my heart of hearts, I looked at the actual impact that my actions did, including my economic life. And if I would have invested into financial products, which I knew deep down were wrong for society and hurt, especially innocent people, I think that this would be a major sin for me.
Yeah, it seems like the Islamic economic model is at odds with the way Islamic finance is practiced today. It seems like it's at odds with impact investing, because you'd think that traditional Islamic economics, which is based on trade and based on real assets and based on equity and justice, and like as you mentioned, Quranic injunction or Quranic verses which talk about how to be just and how to be equitable in trade, and to be based on trade, not to be based on speculative or like a fractional reserve, like as the banking system is practiced on. But from it sounds like what you're saying is that the Islamic finance industry as it is today isn't really in line with impact investing.
No, it's not at all in line with impact investing. Here and there, there's some projects which we see which are encouraging. But for me, I mean, if you look at it, Islamic finance is about, or shall I say, modern Islamic finance is about 60 years old.
Right.
You started out from a very, very small base, yeah. Now it's grown considerably, but it is tiny compared to what it should be. Because I'll be candid with you, Hassan.
Mm.
The vast majority of Muslims don't believe in Islamic finance. They say, well, we just see conventional finance here and a couple of people who are trying to make money out of this.
Why
So
do you say
there's,
that, Reza? Why? Do you think it's because it's a replication of the conventional?
I think that there's, to be candid with you, there's a lot of opportunists within within Islamic finance. And, and I appreciate that there's people who genuinely want Shah compliant halal financial instruments, and I commend them. But what I see is that there's a lot of people who think that they can just change a conventional financial instrument, throw in a little some bells and whistles, and then they'll be able to sell it to Muslims. Now, the Islamic finance industry is large, but is small compared, even tiny compared to what it should be. Right now, the people who there's a lot of products which are sold to, for lack of a better term, ultra religious. And again, it's not a criticism; it's just a fact. Yeah? And people take those products because there's nothing else. But what I can guarantee you, Hassan, is that if there were real financial instruments oriented towards the real economy, which paid a market rate, and where it was very clear the kind of positive impact that you have on society, that you have on, and where you're helping poor people. And if this is communicated correctly and transparently, I would guarantee that there's a lot of Muslims which previously did not consider Islamic finance a viable option, would consider it. What you need to do is give a market return, but with top-level governance and transparency.
What you're saying, I think, is the more Islamic wholesome economic model, but the way the industry is like working or functioned for, say, the last 50, 60 years has been within this, traditional banking sense, where you have a central bank as a lender of last resort, and you have you're governed by a central bank which is predominantly riba-based fractional reserve banking, which can create credit. But it sounds like from what you're saying is that we need a complete overhaul, or like a overhaul of the economic model in the way Islamic finance works.
Yes, but even what happens is that Islamic finance has tried to be something within conventional finance. But what is interesting, that we are noticing right now, is that conventional finance has reached what I would describe has reached a fork in the road. More than that, yeah. It's got a Cornelian dilemma. Because what happens is that you've got a financial economy which is immense and which is a parasite on the real economy.
Right.
I mean, if you look at the 2008 crisis, okay, all these countries, they gave a lot of money to their banks, but these banks didn't give the money to the real economy. And yeah, there's a lot of financial institutions. They might boast a lot about helping the small-time entrepreneur, the new business owner. That's the image that they want to project. But when you look at the detail, they are making most of their money out of transactions in the purely financial economy, taking money off the ECB and re-lending the money to the ECB. These are things that are very prevalent and very, very concerning, because you've got a monetary mass which is ever increasing. But on the other hand, the real economy, people creating products and services that people need in real life, well, these are being hunted down. Yeah? And that's very, very unfortunate. Yeah.
Right.
And also it attracts a lot of scientists, of engineers towards the speculative sector, who otherwise should have been in the real economy. So there's even a brain loss there.
What do you mean by real economy? Could you, for our listeners, what do you mean by real economy and the financialized economy? Maybe you could break that down for us.
Okay. So the real economy is all around us. I mean, all the products that we use, all the services that we use, all the things that we couldn't do without. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that in finance, there are things which are extraordinary. Insurance is something powerful. Even options and derivatives, when used correctly, are very useful instruments. But what you're having is an ultra speculative financial economy whereby a number of institutions are too big to fail and essentially believe in privatizing gains and socializing losses. Seen it in 2008, and you see it in other situations. And also, there's a very incestuous relationship between the political class and the top banking class. It's very concerning. But it is what it is. There seems to be a bit of a revolving door regarding this. Yeah. And but if you look at, let's say, economies in Western Europe, I mean the whole of Europe, you have people who have needs and who need products and who need jobs. You've got real companies who produce real products who need financing, and increasingly that financing is hard to find. So that's very concerning.
So are you saying that, the real economy, so for example, if you go into a barber shop and get a haircut, that's a real economic transaction, whereas if you're on a Bloomberg terminal and someone's creating money out of nothing or just creating a financial product, is that the difference between the real economy and a financialized economy, would you say?
Well, I mean, we all need very, very tangible things. Obviously, the services of a barber is something that we need. People who are behind Bloomberg terminals, I think there's different kinds of transactions. Yeah, there's people who are trying to invest their savings so that they have got a good future and that they have a dignified retirement. I think that's totally noble. That's totally fine. On the other hand, you've got people, you've got large financial entities who do algorithm trading. They do millions of transactions a day to gain a couple of bips on every transaction. I think that if you look at The Big Short, there's a lot of things that you can learn from this. Yeah? And there's a lot of transactions on the markets right now which are purely artificial. I mean, one would say, okay, this is good for the liquidity of the market. Things can move, but all politicians have been against a Tobin tax, whereby every time you make a stock purchase, you have to pay a little percentage. Yeah, I mean, most politicians are against this, and that's unfortunate. But on the other hand, yeah, as goes a French saying, les peuples ont le gouvernement qu'ils méritent. So is it a reflection of what society wants deep down? I don't know. But what I can guarantee you is that from an employment perspective, yeah, from a sustainability perspective, and even from an existential perspective on this beautiful planet that our Creator has created. Now, it doesn't make sense because we're shooting ourselves in the foot. And when you look at everything to do with climate change, global warming, well, the way our capital markets are set up, the way our economy is set up, this directly impacts climate change.
Yeah. Just there was one thing you mentioned earlier on, Reza, was about Islamic finance transactions and their relationship with impact investing. I just want to unpack a bit of that and get your thoughts on it. I remember back in 2014, as we're going back about a decade ago, there was a
Mhm.
really fascinating transaction done by I think it was the World Bank
Mhm.
uh, and their arm on immunization of children. And there have been like
Yes.
other subsequent deals from other entities like the Islamic Development Bank and others. Um, do you think the Islamic finance industry has tried in the past to try and like be more in line with impact investing?
Well, it's very paradoxical, Hassan. And I'll give you a couple of things which I've noticed. But if you're talking about, shall I say, true impact sukuk, I think that the work of Dr. Jamila Mahmood should be uploaded with a one wash sukuk. And so there's been a lot of talk about sustainability, about ESG, about SRI, and sukuk, but there's been very few actual examples. And the the truth is that it seems that true impact doesn't seem to have an audience, even though everyone wants to talk the talk, but very few people want to walk the walk. That being said, especially in the current context of climate change, it's going to become more and more important to be able to do true impact. And I think that the Islamic world has got money that needs to be oriented towards climate adaptation and climate mitigation. I had the great pleasure of meeting Dr. Amjad Saqib, the founder of Kuwat Foundation. And I remember, I mean, recently there was this terrible, terrible floods in Pakistan, and there were millions of livestock that died, yeah, and it took a terrible toll on the people. So many lives lost, and increasingly, the Islamic world and the world at large, but especially the Islamic world, is going to have to raise money to prevent such climate catastrophes. For one simple reason, Hassan, it would cost us far, far less to work to prevent those catastrophes than to try to remedy them after. As the English proverb says, a stitch in time saves nine.
Hmm.
And that's where we are. So we are going to have to put money into true impact, especially climate adaptation, climate mitigation, simply to ensure, for lack of a better term, our survival. That's a cold, hard truth, Hassan.
And what other areas other than climate can impact fulfill within the Islamic world, do you think?
We could look at helping, uh, giving more opportunities to women.
So
because I think that
women empowerment.
there's there's a lot of there's a lot of human intellect, extraordinary capacities amongst the ladies in the Islamic world. And also, I think that there's a lot of, we're in a situation where a lot of families, yeah, can't simply rely on one income earner. It would be very good for women to be able to have an economic life, yeah, being able to combine it with a family life, with having children, but also being able to earn, yeah. And I think that the internet age offers a lot of possibilities. But I would say that from a macroeconomic perspective, there's a lot of talent in amongst women in the Islamic world, and the Islamic world badly needs that talent.
And do you think that the current Islamic financial institutions globally are not doing enough to fulfill some of these needs? I mean, you've talked about women empowerment, other things that came to my mind were things like food security, economic inclusion, these kind of topics, in addition to environment and climate. Do you think that the current IFIs are not doing enough to fulfill this?
You know, what is paradoxical is that very often impact financial institutions are doing more in in Islamic world to do true impact for the woman as compared to Islamic financial institutions. that is very unfortunate. But so I mean,
But why, Riza?
impact fin-
Why, Riza? Why do you think that is? Is it because it's to do with the lack of ROI, or do you think it's to do with not being interested or shareholder value? Why do you think that is?
I think there's a number of reasons for that. And again, I'm speaking in a very factual manner. There's some extraordinary research work which was done, it would be about 13, 14 years back, by a gentleman named Murat Unal, yeah, and his outfit is named Funds at Work. And Funds at Work at the time did a study about the Sharia scholars on the various Sharia boards in the most important Islamic financial institutions. And from a network analysis point of view, looked at the interconnection between them. And essentially, his conclusion was that the most important Sharia scholars sat together on the most important boards. So, for lack of a better term, there's a certain amount of groupthink. And also, there, it's very unfortunate, but there's not enough transparency into how a lot of decisions are taken. I think it would greatly help the industry if we had a data bank where, okay, qualified users could check the Sharia reasonings on various transactions. I think it would help the industry as a whole. It would help bring a lot of new potential users and investors into Islamic financial products. But right now, there's opacity. And again, I mean this in a factual manner, not as an opinion. There's a lot of groupthink. So what I'm saying is that personally, what I'm focused on is my relationship with our Lord Creator and being able to use whatever little money and resources I have, try to do good in this world. Yeah? And to be honest with you, Hassan, there's a lot of things which are declared Sharia compliant and which are not. And sometimes vice versa. I'll give you one short anecdote.
Go for it.
Years ago, there was one specific company which was instrumental in murdering, raping, and pillaging Muslims in a Muslim country. That company was extremely large, but it was very clear to everyone in financial markets what that company was doing. It was essentially a company involved in, shall I say, mercenarial activities. And that company was included in the Islamic index of a major index. And there was a Sharia board on that index with some major Sharia names. So I found it very distressing that those highly paid scholars would have included such a company in such an index. So that gutted me. And again, especially in Islamic fintech, I mean also in conventional Islamic finance, there's a lot of entities that like to present themselves as ultra-ethical, but then you look into the detail, and what they do is not that ethical. I mean, sukuks raising money, using sukuks to raise money to build fancy real estate, but using quasi-slave labor. I wouldn't describe this as Islamic. I don't think that our Lord and Creator would approve of this. So so that's what I just notice, and it's not even by researching, it's just things that I've noticed, and I'm sure that it's only the tip of the top of the iceberg.
There's two other areas I wanted to ask you about. The first was about this transition from halal to tayyib, so a more wholesome Islamic finance or economic system. You know, there's been efforts by the likes of Jeffy and some other people, other organizations, which are trying to come up with a framework or come up with some kind of methodology of a more tayyib framework. What do you think about some of these efforts that some of these people are doing?
I mean, Jeffy, for instance, is backed by the Scottish government. It's a good partnership. It's a powerful partnership. There's also the work of RFI, led by Blake Gould. But what I'd say to these entities is that, okay, you're working on theoretical framework, but the proof of the pudding is in the eating. One thing, yeah. And as the French would say, c'est en forgeant qu'on devient forgeron. So all this theoretical framework, fine, but you need actual products. You need to be the change that you want to see in the world, as Gandhi said. And what I see is that, okay, everyone wants to talk the talk, but very few people want to walk the walk. People need to walk the walk. We need actual products. We need to orientate money towards real social problems. And we need to do so in an economically sustainable way. There's very few people who are doing that right now.
So
we need a... Yeah. Well,
do you think that there needs to be like the larger conventional incumbents, say, like not like the likes of BlackRock or somebody like this, or someone with some real, like, you know, cachet or some clout or some real heavyweights to drive this change to a more tayyib framework rather than the Islamic finance players who are trying to do this?
Yes. I think that, what happens is that there's a lot of conventional financial players who don't want to associate overtly with uh, with Islamic finance, with Sharia, because it's very controversial, especially in the current context. But if you look at it, the Muslim world is a quarter of the global population. Within 50 years, it's going to be a third. Muslims are mostly unleveraged. They have money to invest. So this is a superb opportunity for serious financial institutions that are willing to play the long game. It's not about an overnight success. These are things that you build over time, and overall, this can become a success, but over time. And what I think is that it's totally possible to have impact financial instruments that are halal or taib. Totally possible. It's just a question of structuring correctly, of having the right conversations with the right people.
But in saying that, doesn't that add more cost to a transaction, or do you think it could be pari passu?
No, I think it could be pari passu because people are not thinking out of the box. And you will reply to me, oh, again, you're talking about this theoretically. Without going into too much details, I can tell you that I'm working on one product, which is about climate adaptation, climate mitigation, which will be not only halal or taib. I would say that this product is actually Quran based.
All right.
And this will have a global impact and is of an existential nature for not only the Islamic world, but the world. And also, I'm in talks with two entities of the impact world who are, I'd say, very much in the very top tier. Yeah. There's one entity which is over 20 years old, yeah, which does very interesting work and Swiss-based. And I hope that we'll be able to do more work together. And there's another entity which is more recent, but the founder is someone who I find inspirational and who essentially are described as a man of faith and of action.
Mm.
And who right now is doing extraordinary work around impact in a number of emerging markets, but true impact. And the people backing his initiatives, I must say, are of top caliber.
As we bring the podcast to a close shortly, Reza, the other question I wanted to ask you, or the other topic I wanted to ask you was, do you think fintech, and by extension, Islamic fintech, can help address this gap in halal impact?
Well, depends on your definition of what is Islamic fintech. Fintech ultimately is technology going into finance and making finance more efficient. Because ultimately, finance is about exchange of certified information. Now, Islamic fintech is a buzzword, but by and large, I haven't really seen anything truly innovative or truly disruptive. Sure, there's a number of entities that are presenting themselves, but it's not clear to me where they're innovative from a cost disruption point of view. I'd describe it as products which are just repackaged. And also, the issue is that a lot of Islamic fintech platforms are actually far more expensive than their conventional counterparts. So, what's the value added for normal wage earning Muslims to put money into more expensive platforms, very often for a less good service? So,
I also think there's been a decline in deal making in the past, say, year or so in VC more broadly, and that's probably had an impact as well. But I guess my question on fintech and helping address this halal impact gap, what about tech in general? Do you think tech solutions like clean tech, agri-tech can help address some of these challenges Islamic countries are facing?
yes, super important. I mean, if you're talking about agri-tech, one thing which I look at is desertification. Desertification keeps me awake at night, Hassan. People don't realize how bad it is. And we bet the Islamic world, I mean, the world generally needs to get its act in order, but the Islamic world in particular, I mean, people don't realize, but the Arab Spring was very much caused also by climate change. Just an example, Syria, which was one of the most stable countries in the Islamic world, when there was the Arab Spring, uh, part of the reason why people revolted was that the revolt was started in the major cities by people who were previously in the countryside and who got impoverished by climate change. When the trouble started in Syria, Syria had had the longest uninterrupted drought in its history.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So a lot of
That's
people who previously were in the countryside living dignified lives had to move as climate refugees to major Syrian cities. And when the revolt started, they're the ones who took up arms. And that's very, very unfortunate. If you look at the result of everything that happened in Syria, I mean, my heart weeps when you look at all the extraordinary architecture, the beautiful cities that were destroyed because of this. My heart weeps. And it was certainly, I mean, climate change provided a very, very fertile ground for war. And that's why we need to look at climate change and tackle it with climate adaptation and climate mitigation measures.
I don't think people really understand the threat of climate. I agree with everything you said about Syria. Speaking personally, um, between 2006 and 2010, there was really bad droughts in their history, and
Yes,
that ruined a lot of people's livelihoods, especially in the agricultural heartlands of Syria. And what's interesting, or what's sadder rather, is that this is not just specific to Syria. I think also that was the same in Tunisia, where
of
the Arab
course.
began in
Where
2010.
it started, yeah,
Yeah, and other countries as well, like Egypt, which is the largest wheat importer in the world. There's a lot of environmental
totally.
challenges in Egypt and in other countries, like even in the GCC, for example. There's a lot of environmental challenges. And I was reading a report from Harvard last year saying that majority of the Gulf could be uninhabitable within the next 50 years if they don't do something um,
Totally,
to
totally.
climate threats. So yeah, I definitely think, but it doesn't seem like the Islamic finance industry or in finance in general seem to be too concerned about this. They seem to be following the trend, is what I see. They
I,
seem to.
I mean, as you know, Hassan, I have a space sector startup in Luxembourg, And what I can tell you is that the space sector, especially with satellite observation solutions, well, certainly they're following what's happening in climate. Yeah? I mean, our own company, No Hunger, did a biomass calculation algorithm using satellite data, and we've done 2 climate adaptation, climate mitigation projects for Swedish clients. The algorithm project was an ESA project, European Space Agency project. So I mean, space science is looking climate, but the financial sector, I mean, shall I say, the Islamic finance sector does not look at it, and that's very unfortunate. Within conventional finance, you have got the emergence of what I describe as natural capital markets. It's small, but it's growing, and there's a number of very dynamic actors. But you can't argue with climate, Hassan. You can argue with a lot of things, but you can't argue with climate. And right now, for instance, in Belgium, we've had the chilliest month of June in a long, long while.
Same exactly here in the UK. It's been unseasonably cold for June. Reza, you mentioned about No Hunger and some of your other projects you're working on. Tell us more about what you're working on these days.
Well, to start with, let me talk about No Hunger. So in November 2019, we participated in an international tech startup competition, which is run by Lux Innovation, which is part of the Ministry of Economy of Luxembourg. And for the first time, they did a space cohort. So we got selected. We did 4 months of acceleration from November 2019 to end of February 2020. And we had gotten selected on the basis of 2 innovations, one technical innovation on vertical farming, and one innovation on the deployment of the vertical farm infrastructure. We graduated end of February 2020. We were on top of the world. We were in the sky, and then COVID happened. So, and COVID, initially we thought it would be 2, maximum 3 months, just like the SARS crisis, and then it lasted 2 years. But we survived this, and hopefully we are stronger now. And it just brought to us the reality of what climate change is. Yeah? And also remember that the official reason for the COVID crisis is deforestation. And the one thing that we need to be aware of is that, I mean, in my case, I've got only one life. I try to think what is important to me. And every day I try to work towards that goal. And in terms of the projects that we are working on, so on the one hand, I told you, we are looking at doing a climate adaptation, climate mitigation project, which has got global ramifications. And as I said, is Quran-based. And once we have a public announcement, obviously you'll be the first one to know. Secondly, we've got to find the right technological solutions to tackle, to wage a war. I'd even say more, to wage a jihad on climate change. And there, we need the right solutions. And we have got a massive project regarding that. There is also one initiative that we're looking at regarding tackling food inflation, starting with West Africa. You should know that there's artificial food inflation created in West Africa because of the dearth of financial instruments. We are going to tackle that, inshallah.
Inshallah. Inshallah.
And lastly, I think that what is also very important, hugely important, is to be able to create sustainable jobs in emerging markets, especially in the Islamic world, where there's a very, very young demographic structure. We're going to have to create tens of millions of jobs. But what is important to bear in mind is that these are not simply people, these are also consumers, and these can also be workers. These can be part of value creation. And we need to foster that value creation. And also what is interesting is that if you look at Europe is aging. Europe has got technology, has got a lot of very good things, but is aging. Emerging markets in the Islamic world, starting with Africa, have got young populations, have got potentially growing populations, and have got a growing middle class. There's a lot of synergies to be had. But then it needs to be, the discussion needs to be a dignified discussions of equals. I mean, I'm just stating what is a reality in mainland Europe right now, with the elections, the results of the elections, which are very, very concerning. But I think that the intelligentsia in Europe, in a number of European institutions, realize that if you want to maintain our quality of life, we want to prosper, we need to prosper together. There cannot be win-lose situation. It needs to be win-win-win all round.
Absolutely. Reza, how can people find out more about you and your projects? Are you active on social media?
Hassan, I have a fairly large network on LinkedIn. So if you just Google my name, Reza Zain Jofrali, they will find me. They're very welcome to follow me or to send me a connection. I'm also on X, Twitter, and even recently I've joined Instagram, which is extremely, extremely popular with the new generation. So I try to keep up with new developments.
Fantastic. Reza, yeah, go for it.
But as usual, I'm always open for a first conversation. A very smart man who was my teacher in Leuven more than a decade ago told me to always keep an open mind. I'm always willing to have a first conversation.
Fantastic. This is not the first, and hopefully won't be the last time we have a engaging conversation like this, Reza Jafrali. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise, Hassan. Always a pleasure. And if I may add, I think that with Majlis and Markets, you are actually having the more sophisticated, deep conversations that are necessary for the Islamic world. So I want to give you kudos on that. And to our listeners, I'd like to say like, subscribe, and share.
Thank you so much. That's really kind of you. No, Reza Jafrali, once again, this has been a great conversation. Thanks again for coming on the podcast.
It's a pleasure. Keep safe, Hassan.